So welcome into our virtual LAN labs. In this video and in the next couple of videos, we're going to configure some VLANs on our lab equipment, and we will be setting up a VLAN trunk between our two switches just to show you how it's done. Now for this lab, I have to actually use physical Cisco switches because GNS3 does not support switch hardware. And the reason for that is that the Cisco switches have proprietary hardware built into them to do the switching functions. Since Cisco's not going to release the source for this proprietary ASIC software, which is actually a piece of hardware, we as network techs that are learning all of this have to go to eBay or to a reseller to buy a switch. Now in GNS3 you can configure up a 3700 with an Ethernet switch module in it. However, the commands are slightly different than they are on an actual switch, and that's why I have both a 2960 and a 2950 switch. Now both of these are layer 2 switches, which at the CCENT level is all you really need because you're not going to do any layer 3 functions at this level, at the CCENT or at the CCNA, the ICND2 exam. But enough of all my talking, let's jump into configuring VLANs. Now there are two different ways to configure a VLAN on Cisco switches, and I'll show you how to do it both ways. They're both very simple, and when you look at it, you'll go, well, duh, that makes complete sense. So if I look here on my 2950 and I do show CDP neighbor, I see the 2960 on the other side of fast Ethernet 047 and 048. If I go over to the 2960 and do the same thing, I see not only the 2950 but also an older 2900 series switch that I use for VLAN breakouts. We won't be configuring this 2900 series switch because, to be quite honest, the curriculum doesn't call for us to configure VLANs on routers, which is technically what this 2900 series switch is. It has the same iOS and the same command set as a Cisco router. So first things first, let's go back to the 2950, and I'll do show VLAN, which is the command you issue to show you all of the VLANs defined on this switch and what ports the VLANs use. In this case, we only have the one VLAN, VLAN 1, its name is default. We do have these other four VLANs at the bottom for FIDI and token ring, but since this switch does not support any of that hardware, all of those are active yet unsupported. Down below the VLAN list, you have some other technical information about all the VLANs. We won't get into any of this at the CCENT level. But if you're really interested, Google's your friend, and it'll tell you more than you ever wanted to know about any of the token ring or remote span VLANs, so on and so forth. So the first way we're going to configure VLANs is to configure the VLAN first and then put our port in the VLAN. Honestly, this is my preferred way of setting up VLANs, and I'll explain why once I show you the second way of setting up VLANs. So we'll go into config mode, config T, we'll do VLAN. We now have to give the VLAN a VLAN identifier between 1 and 4094, which is the VLAN ID supported by this particular switch hardware. In this case, we'll do VLAN 30, and we hit enter. Now we're in VLAN configuration mode, and in here, we can configure a great number of VLAN-specific configuration settings. Things like the media type, the MTU, so on and so forth. Again, we're not going to get into this at this level of the CCNA. The only thing we'll be interested in is the name. In this case, we can actually give the VLAN a name so that when we do show VLAN, it doesn't show up as just VLAN 30. So in this case, we'll do name and we'll do DMZ hosts. Now that we've done that, we exit back out, and if we do show VLAN at this point, we see we now have VLAN 30 DMZ host. It's active, but there are no ports configured in the VLAN. To do that requires a separate interface level configuration command, and we'll pick that up in the next video.